Hello and welcome to season 2 of Frank Talks. I'm Karline Moeller and I'm the founder of Art Frankly. And I'd like to introduce to you my co-host, Ellie Hayworth, who started Hayworth, an art consultancy that is committed to promoting intrepid ideas at the intersection of art and design. Today we are chatting with Jaynelle Hazard, who is the executive director and curator of the Tephra Institute of Contemporary Art in Virginia. We are excited to hear more about Jaynelle's career path. So Ellie, I'll let you get this interview started.
Amazing. Thank you, Karlina. And Jaynelle, I am so excited to be chatting with you today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I think it's going to be great fun. So for the Art Frankly viewers who don't know, Jaynelle and I actually attended graduate school together at the Sotheby's Institute of Art. So this is kind of a fun reconnection that we're having here by way of a Frank Talk. But Jaynelle, for those who don't know you, it would be really great if maybe you could just give us kind of a brief synopsis about your journey to art. What was it that compelled you to pursue this career?
Absolutely. So I have an interesting journey because I originally had a burgeoning career in fashion. And so, I'm from Virginia. I got my undergraduate degree at VCU, and my degree was mostly in fashion design, but it was heavily rooted in art history. And so I graduated with my undergrad. I moved to New York shortly after, and I worked for Macy's corporate and Estee Lauder corporate. And shortly after, I left New York and moved overseas to Cape Town, South Africa, to Germany and Italy. And I really bounced back and forth between those countries for about 4 years. I was there as a model. And while I was in South Africa, I really became inspired to revert back to art history. And so I started working at Blank Projects Gallery in South Africa in Cape Town. And Jonathan Garnham, who's the owner of that gallery, really took me underneath his wing, helped me to get acclimated to the gallery side of the art world and to sort of learn that industry. And it was fantastic. And I went back to New York and I applied to Sotheby's Institute of Art in New York. And I got in and it was fantastic and really sort of spearheaded my career in the arts. And I also worked for UBS in New York, the UBS Art Collection, for a brief period. And shortly after, I moved to DC, and I'm now leading the Tephra Institute of Contemporary Art.
It's amazing. And so Jaynelle, obviously I know you personally. And so I remember as we were kind of, undergoing the kind of rigorous academia at Sotheby's, there was a lot of synergy between the fashion world and the art world. And at the time we had talked a lot about you wanting to curate some interesting, whether it was fashion presentations that had art installations involved. So I do think there was a lot of overlap. I'm curious to hear if maybe there was a specific learning curve or something that you felt, really necessitated a kind of rigorous, jumping back into the art world ethic.
It didn't seem like there was a learning curve, but something that I really connected to in my studies at Sotheby's was the experience, the art experience, because there's a lot of synergy in that across many different creative industries. And so my focus of my research at Sotheby's was in exhibition design. And I think my thesis title was experiential aesthetics, and how elements like spatial configurations, architecture and sensory all affect the visitor experience. And so from there, I just connected that with my art historical knowledge and studies from undergrad that seeped into the master's program. And it all sort of made sense to me. So I didn't really experience too much of a disconnect.
Great. So I think this is kind of a perfect segue for us to have a conversation about your role with Tephra. So you've undergone a lot of, or actually the organization has undergone a lot of changes with you at the helm. And you've certainly brought the programming into a very interesting and kind of cutting edge moment with a lot of contemporary artists. So maybe you can just tell us a little bit about some of the key developments and what your vision was when you joined Tephra.
Sure. So I was recommended to this role by the former executive director of what was then Greater Reston Art Center. So at that moment, this person was moving out of the role into a new endeavor, and the organization was preparing to rebrand. So they already established the name. You know, we talked about it during the interview process, and they were really looking for someone to sort of spearhead the organization in its next chapter. The name was decided, but the brand identity was not. And the language behind the brand in terms of the direction the organization was moving was not either. So I really helped to sort of bring the whole rebranding full circle and get it prepared for launch, which was incredibly exciting. I thought it was an opportunity that I couldn't pass up. And the organization, in terms of the board of directors and the staff, were all so open to ideas to be more forward leaning and to sort of embrace this already critically engaged practice that they were building. So Tephra, to provide a little bit of background, is a 501c3 nonprofit, non-collecting institution. And the word Tephra represents matter that's essentially erupted from a volcano, and that matter nourishes the ground, it changes the landscape. And when they decided on the name, they really saw synergy between that same idea of the arts having this combustibility of creativity and nourishing the ground and producing, you know, generating new ideas and growth. And so we work with artists and institutions and universities and thought leaders globally through our exhibitions and programs and education initiatives. We essentially are devoted to celebrating artists and devoted to providing exhibitions, content that generate new ideas and perspectives.
I love it. And I personally, I'm a big fan of Gizella Cologne, and I saw that you had mounted a project with her. So that beautiful monolith, I imagine, was a great piece to be living with for some time.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Gizella Cologne. The exhibition was titled Quantum Shift, and it was my sort of curatorial debut with the organization. And it was an incredible show because Gizella's from California. She's Puerto Rican, and she is just a buzz of energy herself. But her work really is this combination of science and art and industrial and organic and feminine and masculine. And she's all about blurring the lines between all of those things. Her objects are made from optical acrylics, but they're sort of seamless, which is different than most minimalist works, which have typically very sort of straight edges and 90-degree line, where something starts and where something ends. And so we ended that show last summer, this past summer, a couple months ago, and we just installed one of her works in Washington, D.C. So one of her sculptures for her monolith series. That work is called the Parabolic Monolith Iridium. It's 15 feet tall. It's located right by the National Mall, right by the Smithsonian's Renwick Gallery, right down the street from the White House. And it's really significant because when you think about DC, you think about history, you think about monuments, and this is our own different monument, a very different monument from Gizella Cologne that is essentially, it's an object of the future. It represents transformation and growth. And all of this was happening at the same time as a lot of social and political uprising happening in the world. So I don't know, I'm very proud about that. And I'm also proud of Gizella and excited for her because her work, a sculpture from the same on view now at Free Sculpture in London. Yep. And the art newspaper just identified it as one of their top 5 picks of their favorites this year. It was covered in Art Forum. And so if anyone's looking to sort of get a peek at this special object, come to DC if you're on the East Coast and check out the sculpture. It's on view until February 2022.
Yeah, it's a very, very special piece. It actually, I'm not sure if it was the same sculpture, but she also had mounted a work site specifically in Palm Beach through the Gavlack Gallery just outside in the Royal Poinciana Plaza. So it's something that I've experienced in person and really enjoyed.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it was really lovely. So maybe Jaynelle, you can tell us a little bit. I know that there is a fun show on your horizon that you're itching to talk about. Maybe you can give us a little sneak peek of what we can expect to come in early 2022.
Sure. So our next exhibition is going to be with filmmaker, video artist, and photographer Laurel Nakadante. We actually program in conjunction with the Hirshhorn Museum in DC in anticipation of the exhibition. The exhibition is going to be curated by Lily Siegel, and it's presented in partnership with George Mason University. And it's going to highlight Laurel's most recent bodies of work that focus on family history, love, life, and loss. And it's all through this sort of matriarchal frame. So that's going to be a really great, be one of the first times Laurel's work has been shown in DC outside of the Hirshhorn, because her work is in the Hirshhorn collection. But also after that, we have an exhibition with young painter Dominic Chambers coming up. He's a graduate from Yale. His work explores Black intellectualism, literary narratives, this idea of leisure, which is really significant, as you don't really see a lot of Black portraiture having this sort of lighthearted element happening. And his work is really rooted in this research behind color theory. So it's going to be really incredible. And again, one of the first times that his work is shown in DC. So we're very excited about that.
I love that. Well, we'll definitely make sure that both the Art Frankly platform and Hayworth can help kind of disseminate the news as we gear up for the 2022 year. So that should be fun. Yeah. So Jaynelle, we like to round out with some professional practice questions. And I think one of them that I think is kind of near and dear, considering I know you, is, you do have this exceptional professional career in the arts, but you're also a very loving and devoted wife and mother. And I think there are a lot of the people that we're speaking to for these Frank Talks have that kind of dual role, if you will. And so I'm curious to hear how you kind of strike a balance between work and life, and if art is playing a role in kind of your mothering and wifehood.
Oh, that's such a great question, because yes, I am a mother of 2 toddlers at home. We have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, Hendrix and Genevieve. And you asked about the balance, Ellie, but I don't know if we've found it yet. The 2 little ones.
You know what? I think that's okay. I think that is just part of the journey.
We're taking it day by day. But I will say, I'm for someone that's giving yourself in love as a wife and, as a mom and work, you're giving so much of yourself in these areas. It's really important to remember to give yourself time to do something that makes you happy. And if that's like 10 minutes a day, if that's 30 minutes a week, or whatever that looks like for your lifestyle, add it to the calendar. For me, I have to add it to the calendar, because otherwise it's going to be left under the rug. But that's really important, going back to the cliche, you can't give from an empty cup or an empty pot or whatever that is. So we're taking it day by day. We're being patient with ourselves and just trying to do things for ourselves along the way too.
I love that. Well, that certainly is a great insight and a great kind of best practice, if you will, that we as women and anybody who's going into the parenthood space should definitely keep in mind. We love to kind of round these out with maybe a forward-looking kind of note to the future. So I'm wondering if there was one kind of parting word of advice, especially coming out of a very challenging year last year, and certainly it's continued through much of 2021. What is, kind of one parting word of advice that you would give to an aspiring arts professional?
One piece of advice?
I mean, it can be more than a word.
Okay. Well, I think I have 3 things. So I think from what I've learned in my experience, I think it's very important to understand who you're working for. What are the goals of the organization? What is their mission that they're trying to achieve? That should affect what you contribute and how you sort of show up every day. And speaking of showing up every day, I definitely encourage you to dress for the role that you want. I think that's a proven theory that truly works. And then I think the last thing is understanding, recognizing, and accepting that it's okay to be a student forever. And what I mean is that you can learn from anyone. You can learn from many different experiences, and that, I don't know, you're sort of putting the ego aside and being open and agile and open to adapt, because life is changing, art is changing, culture is changing, and you sort of have to be able to adapt along with that growth change that's happening. So being open to continuing to learn, no matter at what stage, no matter what stage you're in your career, I think is really important as well.
I think that is an amazing note to conclude on. And it's been very lovely to chat with you, Jaynelle. I'm so proud to see you doing so well. I had no doubt. And I hope that we get to connect in person soon, but this has been a fun kind of introduction.
Thank you so much, Ellie. I'm so happy to be here, and it's been wonderful to see you and talk with you today.